our international correspondent.
Is
And I want this posting. Please, why am I not posted to Dubai? I've only to hear it.
You might can't afford it yet.
I always told you. Hi, how you doing? I told you it's quite cold here now. You don't want to come here now. You know, it's too cold. It's about 15 or 20
Why,
maybe.
is it like only 29?
Yeah, well, how did you know?
Well, look, Faheem, we've had a good discussion here. At this moment in time, there's a lot of issues happening in the Westminster bubble, and we talked a bit about that. We spoke to Chris Williamson MP, who was on a whirlwind tour across the UK. He was in Sheffield at a Momentum meeting. I mean, what's your take on what's going on in Westminster? Are we seeing some kind of rebellion, short-term rebellion, or are we seeing some kind of new centrist party being set up? Because the Labour Party has been accused of going to the left, hard left, back to the days of, I don't know, Michael Foot, I should say. Derek Hatton was living in Parliament, but he was just a guy with a Benz issue in Liverpool. And Conservatives are going to the right. Do you feel this is what's happening in West? What's the view like from Dubai? I mean, what are the Middle Eastern people saying? What's the news, international news, the BBC World Service saying?
So look, I mean, if you can indulge with me a little while, and I always like to put a little bit of a historical perspective on it, and I know you guys earlier on in the show
Don't go back to the 18th century. We haven't got time to go from there.
I can't quite remember that far back, but I know you guys went over it earlier on in the show. But if you may just allow me to sort of put my own point of view on that. So in September 2015, Jeremy Corbyn was elected, surprisingly, as the leader of the Labour Party, and it was obviously a shock. On the EU referendum happened the next day. Surprisingly, one of the ladies that put in a no confidence vote against Jeremy Corbyn on the 24th of June was Anne Coffey and Hodges. On the 27th of June, 23 Labour MPs, shadow ministers resigned from 31. He'd lost a no confidence vote. 170 MPs voted against him, with 40 voting in his favour. And the reason why I put that context is quite important. Because
a rebellion against him, right?
It wasn't just that it was a bit of a rebellion. I mean, what the reasons they gave was that he didn't campaign hard enough. He wasn't committed to the referendum. Sorry. So look. Yeah, but the point here is the point I'm trying to make is that they were looking for any excuse because they just didn't like his politics. Okay, and so then you sort of fast forward to the general election. And if you noticed, and I remember it very clearly, they produced the manifesto, and the manifesto surprisingly went through without a trouble. There was no opposition. Why? Because they thought that this was the Michael Foot manifesto, which they called the longest suicide note in history. Surprisingly, it was actually taken by a huge amount of people. It gave Labour the biggest vote bank since the Clement Attlee government. And so then they couldn't realise how is this even possible? So then they started this campaign, and fast forward to what we have now. Those same people are now resigned. The resignations that could happen could be a lot of MPs. It could even be a lot of those 170 MPs that voted in the no confidence motion. You could even find a certain situation.
You feel the 9 or 10? This could be all of those that actually voted against Corbyn may potentially leave.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it would be all of them, but it could be a significant proportion of them. It could even leave the Labour Party as not even the party in opposition. Now, the other thing that's important here, the independent.group is a website that was registered in 2015, very shortly after Jeremy Corbyn was elected. So this isn't something that's happened now that they can't take it because of the situation they're in. This is something that they had planned and was in the pipeline when he was elected.
Let me ask you something. Let me ask you this. If this is something, if the website was registered in 2015 and this is something that was planned, when you look at the MPs that have gone, they're not exactly striking you as front bench intellectualists who've been at the height of the Labour Party.
Look, I mentioned this last week on the show. I mean, these people are fundamentally undemocratic in their nature. They never accepted Corbyn's election, democratic election. They never accepted the re-election. They never accepted the general election. They've never accepted the Brexit referendum vote. And they're not accepting a by-election. But what they are accepting is a people's vote and trying to portray themselves as democratic. And Chaka Umuna, he had the opportunity twice to run for leadership. And if you remember, people were telling him to run. But he said on the second time, he said, I'm going on holiday. Why was he saying that? Because he knows, all of them know, they don't have the grassroots support. The problem with the Labour Party at the moment is that the parliamentary party is on one side and the membership is completely on the other. And the membership...
Is that, Faheem, let me ask you, on the membership itself, is that because, for example, we've got Sahel here, this momentum group was set up. This is the group that's mobilised the party membership. It's some kind of structure. I mean, there was people around from old Labour, socialist left, were kind of drummed down when Blair came in, and this new Labour was the way forward. And he did a great job.
Yeah, I mean,
the elections never been done in the history of the Labour Party.
Forget about we can call it rejuvenated Labour now. What we have is rejuvenated Labour. Momentum is a small group within the Labour Party, but yet look at how many people voted for the Labour Party. That means their policies resonated with a lot of the public. I can't remember the number, but I think it's about 42% of the people voted for Labour. I mean, it's a huge amount. And when you look at the decaying nature of the Labour Party support as the working class and manufacturing base has finished, the Labour Party vote was actually going down. And the fact that this has now gone up is a fundamental change in the fabric of how the Labour Party sees itself. So this is not just momentum, and classing what you see as a momentum party is completely misunderstanding the shift that's happening within politics.
Let me ask Sohail, we've got momentum here. Is the kind of rejuvenation in the Labour Party, so for example the manifesto, Labour got a higher vote share in the last general election based on this Corbyn manifesto. That was the first time Corbyn was tested. If he had done badly, I'm sure he would have resigned, but he didn't. He kept at it. Labour Party, I think what Chris was saying, has got membership was probably on the highest levels it's had for quite a while, ever. But is the Labour Party membership, I could have a club with 5,000 people in, but that doesn't mean they reflect society as a whole. Do you think the Labour Party and the way momentum is organised within the Labour Party setting itself up for government, or is it just going to be a really vocal opposition lead party? Is that what it's going to be?
Not at all. It has ambitions, and it's ambitions for at least 500,000 members, which can surely be a representative voice of the country. And not only that, when we did get that 40% vote, when everybody crashed the whole idea of Corbyn and how he came, 40%. People mobilised and actually understood what the battle was about. I do think this is about government, this is about power. Unless we get people, and we were talking earlier about representation, unless we get people who are unrepresented, those that didn't turn out to vote, unless we get them out, then I think those at the top end, I think we call them the few. The few will be able to manipulate, use the media at will, and deliver the results we've always had. And we know the definition of insanity, I think Einstein told us.
One of the things there was we talked about the few. The few turned up. They become the many all of a sudden in the general election. But when you've got the state media printing stories about you continuously, the last story I think I read was about Corbyn's wife or something, why she left him, why we're interested in why somebody's wife leaves him. I have no idea. What political significance has that got to anything? How do you think going into the next general election, Corbyn will possibly fare, given that quite a few of his MPs have now left?
Look,
I think the Daily Mail has helped us tremendously. Absolutely brilliant stories they've been putting out.
Okay, this is not what I would use, but yeah.
No, without doubt. We know that the value of stories which are actually meaningless and actually don't represent or get close to what people are experiencing every day and can't possibly believe for somebody like Jeremy Corbyn, then actually it's a measure of the media, not the person they're writing about.
Can I just jump in? Sorry, Mahroof, can I just jump in? Sorry, can I just jump in on that question about the media, if I may? Yeah. So in the 80s, it was the Murdoch press was against the Labour Party, and the famous Sun quote, which was the last one out of England, please close the light, and they blamed the media for their losses. What's happened over the last 20 years for sure is that the media has had a propaganda campaign against many different issues, the Iraq War and many other things. But the people have been against, have had a different point of view. And you can see that no matter how much has been written about Corbyn, he's managed to still be there and increase his vote bank. If you remember the mayoral election, and the viciousness of the reporting against him, yet the people voted for him. And the same with the Iraq War. The propaganda that we had, which was so anti Saddam, yet the people said, we don't want to do this. We don't think he has it. So I think the amazing thing now is that people are a lot more savvier. They see through the headlines and they see through the lies. And I think it's you call it the.
Faheem, let me challenge you about the people voting for him. You're right, people are voting for him, but it's not. It might not be the same people that voted Labour 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And I'll give you an example of a local election, example of where we are here. Just over the border in North East Derbyshire, for the first time in my living memory, unless someone tells me there were one in 2006 or something, they've got a Conservative MP called Rowley. Just down the road from here, Mansfield, old mining area, Nottinghamshire. First time in living memory, a Labour MP was defeated by a Conservative. So, yeah, people might have voted in Canterbury. People might have voted in very kind of middle-class urban areas. But in the old towns, Faheem, I'll challenge you on this one. They're not voting Corbyn. Actually, they're voting for something else, and they're voting Conservative, which should be alarming for the Labour Party, because it is losing what would you term a traditional Labour area.
I think you've got a strong point there, because I think it's...
Also, Hill from Momentum's going to challenge me. Go on.
Faheem, I understand you're in Dubai, and I'm sat next to our guest here. The truth of the matter is, if you actually look at Derbyshire, North-East Derbyshire, we had an MP who was determined to support fracking. And fracking is a disaster for the country, let alone Derbyshire. And incredibly unpopular.
So what happened in Mansfield then?
I'll be frank with you. I've not looked at Mansfield too much. We've paid a lot of attention to North East Derbyshire, where Chris Beast will be standing, and we determined that we're going to not least because people have woken up to the whole climate change.
I mean, the MP is called Lee Rowley. I mean, the issue here is, you've got to remember, people get older, or youngsters. Let's say, for example, the next generation of this country will be saddled with the decision that we made 2 years ago on Brexit. And they're saying, you made a decision which we didn't have the ability or the right to take part in, yet we're the ones that are going to suffer the consequences. Now, Corbyn might be mobilising, this is what I'm saying there, sir, Corbyn might be mobilising a core group, but actually, when you look at the boundaries and the constituencies of the country, it doesn't matter if you increase the vote, you've got to win in those constituencies to win the general election. This is the problem with the first past the post. If you don't win, you can increase your majority by 10,000 in Luton South or in Bradford West or in Sheffield.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because they're solid. You don't get
one
seat. You only get one seat.
No, it's absolutely. Sorry, Mahid, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to...
This is for you, actually.
Oh, is it? Okay, well, let me say. No, we do want to address the whole country, and I do understand, dealing with high majorities in single seats is relevant. Not relevant, but it doesn't actually give you a result overall. As far as Brexit is concerned, and nobody really wants to dive into Brexit that much, my belief is that the country voted, and they voted 50-50, and that was your first referendum. And I do believe the 2017 was your second referendum. And I think the second referendum was very much similar to the first referendum. Now, the people's vote issue is all about, let's have another bite of the cherry. Now, if I was the public, which I am, I would be really unhappy to think, well, hang on, you've had 20, 30 years to address my issues. You lost us all the mines, you lost us all the manufacturing, you lost us all the jobs. It's Dinnington. Dinnington is an absolute disaster in terms of how people actually...
Dinnington's in Rotherham for those listeners from elsewhere in the country.
Yeah, effectively, the mining area is now basically warehousing, as far as I can see. And I've been into Dinnington more than once, and it's an absolute disaster.
I went to college there, so I know it quite.
Oh, you know, well, excellent. Well, and you'll know that, somebody actually said to me, it upsets him to see people queuing to buy scratch cards because people are so bereft of the hope. And this is what this whole election should have been about, and this is what we're about. The Brexit thing is a cry for help, and it's not more than that. It's not about racism. It was a cry for help.
Well, I mean, on the Brexit issue, we covered this quite extensively, and we've got evidence to say, yeah, look, immigration played a massive factor on Brexit. I mean, the interview Channel 4, I distinctly remember a guy being interviewed on Barnsley. Channel 4 asked him, what did you vote? He goes, I voted to exit. He goes, why? He goes, I want the Muslims out of this country. And he said, that's got nothing to do with the vote, because I don't care, I just want them out. This was his chance to express his anger. So racism did play a factor. I mean, whether you like it or not.
Well, no. I think and we said earlier, there's always been racism, and people played on it or didn't address it in the last 20, 30, 40 years. That's where the problem lies. And I think the question of others making use of that to leverage the vote that was Brexit is the issue. We saw the posters that Nigel Farage put up.
I remember speaking to Nick Clegg soon after 2016. We were a bit shell-shocked that Sheffield voted out just narrowly. And I asked him, Hallam didn't. Hallam, we were 65-70% in, but, the rest of Sheffield wasn't. And I remember asking him, what do you think? And he says, I think it's a poke in the eye for the Westminster establishment. We clearly are feel that people feel that they're detached from the likes of him, David Cameron, all the rest. He said, it is having said that, Shafak, Nick never lived in Sheffield prior to getting selected either. So he had a house on these things, mate. He had a house. I'm sure he had a house. Yeah, I'm sure. On an MEP salary, he could have quite a few houses, and he got a full pension for 2 years or something as well.
Yeah, he's living in a
coming back to you. Coming back to you, Faheem. Look, I mean, we talked about momentum was something that's been set up. Look, the Conservatives got the 1922 committee. The backbenchers, they control the leadership. They put a vote of no confidence, and that the chair of the 1922 committee can decide whether the Prime Minister stays or don't stay. That's how much power their backbenchers have got. But I mean, going forward, okay, whether you're a pro-Corbyn or against Corbyn or whatever the issue here is, discrimination or Brexit is the kind of cause for many people leaving, or that's what they use as their reason because they don't like the leadership. I think, do you feel they would have found any excuse to leave anyway, regardless of what the situation is? They just want Corbyn to go. Now, the problem is, Faheem, when you have an enemy, you refuse to leave voluntarily. If you fail at your job, you leave on a moral grounds. Look, I'm leaving because morally it's the right thing to do. I'm no longer fit for purpose, they might say. But actually, if somebody keeps voting against you, it's just basically, this is old school politics. The more people try and push you out, the more people are going to dig in and the more people are going to support you. So he's not going to go anywhere. But do you feel that going forward, these people that have left don't make any dent to the Labour Party?
So there's two things here. The first thing is that they've joined a private organisation. It's a company that's registered in Companies House. So you don't actually know who owns it. You don't know who's behind them. And so they're a group.
Who's Momentum?
No, the independent group.
Independent group.
Yeah.
The independent group.
Yeah.
Okay,
So they're not.
Let's not get into the conspiracy theory.
No, I'm not getting into the conspiracy theory.
No.
This is important. And so the fact is that because they're not a party, I think if Corbyn goes tomorrow, they will jump back into the Labour Party. So that's the first part of it. And this is something that's happened.
I raised that at the beginning.
Yeah. And this is something
to be reincarnated. Really.
Yeah, and this happened. You may remember in the 90s it happened to John Major, where 30 MPs lost the whip. If you remember, he called them the bastards. and they left the party, and then they were.
That's a disclaimer from the radio station. The views expressed by I would quickly do LinkFM page. So that was John Major. You were quoting John Major. So
yeah, I was quoting John Major. It was widely reported at the time.
Okay.
And the thing was that these guys were they lost the whip and then they were brought back in. So there is a possibility that's why they created this group, and that's why I was talking about it in that way, that this is a group rather than a party, so that they may come back at any time. And that's probably the way that this is heading, and that's probably why they've left it open for their other colleagues to say, look, sort this out so that we can reunite later.
But the thing is, Faheem, the difference, politically speaking, almost, when you lose the whip and when you resign from the party, these people have not just removed themselves from the Labour Party whip, they've actually resigned from the Labour Party.
Yeah, and so this, I think there's
when you're suspended by the Labour Party, you're removed from the whip, but you don't have the party.
Yeah, so there's a second point here. I think there's a second point here for Labour, which is if these guys had actually stayed in the party, and then there was a general election, and then they had some seats, they would have made the life very difficult for Labour. I think for Labour, it's actually a good thing that they've left. If they're able to sort of regroup, and by the time the next election happens, which is another 2 years.
So are you saying what they should have done is what Corbyn, Galloway, and all of these were doing when they were in the party, being complete thorns in the side of the establishment or the leadership, rather than just to leave?
What I'm saying is that a lot of these guys were probably going to have no confidence and motions against them at the local party anyway. And if they had stayed in the party and then got elected on a Labour manifesto, they would have been a thorn in his side and probably would have taken his majority away and would have been a minority.
Faheem, you say vote to no confidence, but I think my understanding is in the case of Angela Smith, Penistone and Stocksbridge,
it doesn't carry any weight, this vote.
Yeah, what was there? Just about 30 people that turned up to that meeting?
No, I think
it's deselection. It's deselection.
No, the vote to no confidence.
No, I'm talking about deselection.
That many people. So
some of these parties, 592, the one in Ilford, I think it was.
Yeah.
So there might not be that many members there in the first place.
Sure, but I'm saying that I'm talking about deselection of MPs. Right, so if they've gone through a process of deselection.
Well, that wasn't that. That was a vote of no confidence.
No, I meant to say deselection.
We're coming up to a break now, and thank you very much. We've had a really good.
It's a pleasure.
Three-way conversation. Yeah, I like it this way. It's kind of the good old-fashioned cross-talk.
Yeah.
Getting people's point of view across. But enjoy yourself, and thank you for your time. I mean, I'm glad our show's earlier now, between 5 and 7, and we're not keeping you awake after midnight.
I'm awake now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.